I attended the Imprint Culture Lab event, which was held in the Little Tokyo district of Los Angeles at the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy. It was put on by a company called Intertrend Communications, which offers a mix of advertising, public relations, promotions, and events that they put on targeted towards different kinds of Asian American segments of the market. And the idea behind the conference was that you typically have what they called waves of ideas on their webpage that can leave an imprint through the creation of aspects of popular culture, including imprints on products, opinions, and art. So a lot of the conference was devoted to understanding the different ways different kinds of Asian Americans and Asians around the world have impacted pop culture. For example, they talked a lot about Kanye West and how Asian culture has impacted and influenced his style of music making. And I noticed that the event was held at the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy in Little Tokyo. And I thought that was very interesting because, again, I can't help but think about some of the commentary about how place is not important anymore when you think about internet participation. And certainly this event had a lot to do with media and online participation. And it was interesting that it was specifically held in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles, and that it was held at a place called the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy, because so many of the themes had to do with trying to deal with media stereotypes about Asians in the media, and also celebrating specifically Asian contributions to pop culture around the world and in the United States. And I find it very interesting if you look at where events like this are held. A lot of times, in addition to the usual factors in terms of trying to find the right pricing structure and so forth, it turns out conference attendees can be very appreciative of the venue and what that might mean for what the messages that the conference is trying to project. I ran into this at the Vloggies last November, which was kind of a presentation of recognition of different video bloggers, and how people thought it was interesting that it was held in the Castro district, which is sort of a symbol of alternative ways of being, different ways of looking at the world, and they appreciated, some of the attendees, that it was held in that kind of space. And similarly, you have here an event that was held in Little Tokyo and in a place called the National Center for the Preservation of Democracy, and trying to talk about some difficult themes regarding the equality of Asians and their representation in different kinds of media. And I was interested to see that there were different approaches to how to handle media stereotypes, or how to handle some of the issues that have come up with regard to Asians in the media. And not everyone held the same opinion about how to deal with some of those stereotypes. For example, Josh Spear talked about, and he has a very influential trend spotting blog called joshspear.com, and he cited the example of a clothing store who got protest by some bloggers when there was negative Asian stereotypes on their t-shirts, and they were pulled, and he gave that example.
It was a t-shirt with a couple of Chinese symbols on it. They put it in half a dozen stores to sort of test it as they were rolling out delivery of hundreds of thousands of these shirts. A couple blogs came up and said this is, offensive characters that says something that you don't think it says, and they pulled the shirts. And it's just like, that's a good example of the way to use this space. They listen.
Another blogger who's named Brian Lamb, who's the editor of Gizmodo, which focuses on technologies and gadgets, had a different perspective on what it meant to have Asian stereotypes and how they should be handled in media.
There's a funny story where I wrote something about an analyst, and I said what he said was really obvious and boring, and I made some joke about, like, this is no better than a fortune cookie, and he's a Chinese analyst. And so, I say whatever I want on my blog, and I think readers appreciate that. He called me, and we had an hour-long talk why I wasn't going to change that. I stuck by my opinion, and then at one point he threw out this comment saying, you know what, and this guy is about 40-something, so different generation. It's really hard to be Chinese American and get through this industry, and I cut him off right there and I say, don't give me that crap. I'm Chinese, you're Chinese. We made it because we're good. Don't use that as a crutch. I don't want to hear any excuses. If you're good, it's not going to matter. And I think in terms how that relates to blogs and what I write about, if I happen to throw something in that I know about from my background growing up Chinese American and spending time in Tokyo and Hong Kong, that's just going to come out naturally. And I think that my taste is good. My taste is good, and my taste is drawn from those influences. So I'm not worried about saying, hey, I'm Chinese American, here's my Chinese American post. I just want to throw it out there and people appreciate it.
There was some displays of technology, and everywhere at the conference there were reminders about different kinds of influences from different areas of the world, such as China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, and so forth, to celebrate Asian contributions. But there was also a tension between wanting to celebrate Asian contributions and also not particularly wanting to call out certain achievements as necessarily Asian, but rather as just positive achievement that was part of ordinary and everyday life. At lunch, we were treated to a very interesting talk by David Horvath, who is the co-creator of the Ugly Doll line of toys, co-creator with his wife, Sun Min Kim. And I was very interested to hear his perspective on how the Ugly Dolls came to be. He talked about how they met at the Parsons School of Design and how they bonded over media images that they recalled from their past, from their childhood years in school. And he told a story of how he was drawing some figures that Sun Min Kim recognized because they both had a similar school reader that had these images. So she recognized these images that he was drawing as kind of vaguely familiar, and they sort of bonded over those memories of media and what it meant to them growing up. And they came up with a very personal sort of line of dolls called the Ugly Dolls that David talked about trying to market at a big toy manufacturer. And mostly he kept getting very negative comments, such as, well, you know, these toys don't tie in to any kind of game or television show, so why would you want to make those kinds of toys? Why would you do that? And the whole reason for those toys coming into being started out so personally. And he persisted with his vision, even though it was a very personal one, rather than trying to sell something that would be popular because it was tied into some other kinds of media. And now, after the dolls have become popular, he's expanding into other media, such as making books and so forth on the doll that you see here, which is called Bossy. I was particularly interested to see how different discussions came about with regard to how Asians should present themselves in media and how they do influence other pop culture. And I was very interested to see one example in which one of the speakers, John Day, who works for a very powerful advertising firm, was being photographed, and I happened to stumble upon that in the hallway during sessions, and I was really fascinated with the way he presented himself for the camera and his poise and confidence, and I wondered what that would be like to actually be able to present yourself in front of a camera and be cognizant of your media image and how that would be translated around the world and how that would be interpreted. I learned a lot, and I was very glad to go.